Welcome to Light of the Hill Ministries. Today we will be reading Genesis 26 to 28. But before we get to today's reading, let's pray. Abba Yahweh, we thank you for the gift of your set-apart and living word. Thank you for preserving the scriptures throughout the generations so that we may know you, understand your ways, and grow in faith and obedience. As we open Genesis chapters 26 through 28, we ask that you quiet our hearts and remove every distraction from our minds. Fill us with your set-apart spirit, and give us ears to hear what you desire to teach us today. Open our eyes to behold the wonderful truths found in your Torah, and give us understanding that goes beyond knowledge, producing lives that honor and glorify you. Father, help us to learn from the faith of Yitschaq, the victories of Jacob, the choices of Esaw, and the faithfulness you displayed through every circumstance. Teach us to trust you during seasons of uncertainty, to wait patiently upon your promises, and to walk in obedience even when the path before us is not fully clear. Guard us from the temptation to rely on our own wisdom or to accomplish your purposes through our own schemes. Instead, help us to rest in the assurance that you are sovereign, that your plans cannot fail, and that you are always working for the good of those who love you. Write your Torah upon our hearts. Shape our thoughts, our words, and our actions so that they reflect the character of Yahushua the Messiah. Give us humble and teachable spirits, willing to receive correction, eager to grow in righteousness, and faithful to walk in your ways. May this study draw us closer to you and strengthen our faith. Help us not to be hearers of the word only, but doers also, allowing your truth to transform every area of our lives. We dedicate this time to you and ask that everything we say and learn would bring honor to your great name. We pray all these things in the name of Yahushua the Messiah. Amen. Let's read the Torah. So sit back and relax, grab a snack and enjoy the word. Genesis chapter 26 verses 1 to 35. And there was a scarcity of food in the land, besides the first scarcity of food which was in the days of Abraham. And Yitschaq went to Abimelech, sovereign of the Philistines, in Gerar. And Yahweh appeared to him and said, Do not go down to Mitzrayim, live in the land which I command you. Sojourn in this land. And I shall be with you and bless you, for I give all these lands to you and your seed. And I shall establish the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. And I shall increase your seed like the stars of the heavens, and I shall give all these lands to your seed. And in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and guarded my charge, my commands, my laws, and my Torah. And Yitschaq dwelt in Gerar. And when the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, She is my sister. For he was afraid to say, She is my wife, thinking, lest the men of the place should kill me for Ribkah, because she is good-looking. And it came to be, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, sovereign of the Philistines, looked through a window, and he watched and saw Yitschaq playing with Ribkah his wife. So Abimelech called Yitschaq and said, See, truly she is your wife. So how could you say, She is my sister? And Yitschaq said to him, Because I said, Lest I die on account of her. And Abimelech said, What is this you have done to us? One of the people had almost lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us. And Abimelech commanded all his people, saying, He who touches this man or his wife shall certainly be put to death. And Yitschaq sowed in that land, and reaped in the same year 100-fold, and Yahweh blessed him. And the man grew great and went forward until he became very great. And he came to have possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and a great body of servants, and the Philistines envied him. And the Philistines had stopped up all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, and filled them with dirt. And Abimelech said to Yitschaq, Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we. So Yitschaq went from there and pitched his tent in the Wadi Gerar, and dwelt there. And Yitschaq dug again the wells of water which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham. And he called them by the names which his father had called them. But when Yitschaq's servants dug in the wadi and found a well of running water there, the herdsmen of Gerar strove with Yitschaq's herdsmen, saying, The water is ours. And he called the name of the well Esaw, because they strove with him. And they dug another well, and they strove over that one too, and he called its name Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not strive over it. And he called its name Rehoboth, and said, For now Yahweh has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. And from there he went up to Beersheba. And Yahweh appeared to him the same night and said, I am the Elohim of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you, and shall bless you and increase your seed for my servant Abraham's sake. And he built a slaughter place there, and called on the name of Yahweh. And he pitched his tent there, and the servants of Yitschaq dug a well there. Abimelech came to him from Gerar, with Achuzzath, one of his friends, and Pichol the commander of his army. And Yitschaq said to them, Why have you come to me, seeing you have hated me and have sent me away from you? But they said, We have clearly seen that Yahweh is with you. And we said, Please, let there be an oath between us, between you and us. And let us make a covenant with you, that you do no evil to us, as we have not touched you, and as we have done only good toward you, and have sent you away in peace. You are now blessed by Yahweh. And he made him a feast, and they ate and drank. And they rose early in the morning and swore an oath with one another. And Yitschaq let them go, and they departed from him in peace. And on the same day it came to be that the servants of Yitschaq came and informed him about the well which they had dug, and said to him, We have found water. So he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. And when Esaw was 40 years old, he took as wives Jehudath the daughter of Beri the Chittite, and Basemath the daughter of Elon the Chittite. And they were a bitterness of spirit to Yitschaq and Ribkah. Genesis chapter 27 verses 1 to 46. And it came to be, when Yitschaq was old and his eyes were too dim to see, that he called Esaw his elder son and said to him, My son. And he answered him, Here I am. And he said, See now, I am old, I do not know the day of my death. Now then, please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt wild game for me. And make me a tasty dish, such as I love, and bring it to me to eat, in order that my being does bless you before I die. And Ribkah heard when Yitschaq spoke to Esaw, his son. And Esaw went to the field to hunt wild game and to bring it. And Ribkah spoke to Yaakov her son, saying, See, I heard your father speak to Esaw your brother, saying, Bring me wild game and make me a tasty dish to eat. And bless you in the presence of Yahweh before my death. And now my son, listen to my voice according to what I command you. Please go to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, and I make a tasty dish from them for your father, such as he loves. And you shall take it to your father, and he shall eat it, so that he might bless you before his death. And Yaakov said to Ribkah his mother, See, Esaw my brother is a hairy man. And I am a smooth-skinned man. What if my father touches me? Then I shall be like a deceiver in his eyes, and shall bring a curse on myself and not a blessing. But his mother said to him, Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice, and go, get them for me. And he went and fetched them and brought him to his mother, and his mother made a tasty dish, such as his father loved. And Ribkah took the best garments of her elder son Esaw, which were with her in the house, and put them on Yaakov her younger son. And she put the skins of the young goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. Then she gave the tasty dish and the bread, which she had prepared, into the hand of her son Yaakov. And he went to his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am. Who are you, my son? And Yaakov said to his father, I am Esaw your firstborn, I have done as you said to me. Please rise, sit and eat of my wild game, so that your being might bless me. But Yitschaq said to his son, How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? And he said, Because Yahweh your Elohim brought it to me. Then Yitschaq said to Yaakov, Please come near, so that I feel you, my son, whether you truly are my son Esaw or not. And Yaakov went near to Yitschaq his father. And he felt him and said, The voice is the voice of Yaakov, but the hands are the hands of Esaw. And he did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. And he blessed him. And he said, Are you truly my son Esaw? And he said, I am. And he said, Bring it near to me, and let me eat of my son's wild game, so that my being might bless you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate. And he brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Yitschaq said to him, Please come near and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him. And he smelled the smell of his garments, and blessed him, and said, See, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which Yahweh has blessed. And Elohim give you of the dew of the heavens, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brothers, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be those cursing you, and blessed be those blessing you. And it came to be, as soon as Yitschaq had finished blessing Yaakov, and Yaakov had hardly left the presence of Yitschaq his father, that Esaw his brother came in from his hunting. And he too had made a tasty dish and brought it to his father, and said to his father, Let my father rise and eat of his son's wild game, so that your being might bless me. And his father Yitschaq said to him, Who are you? And he said, I am your son, your firstborn, Esaw. Then Yitschaq trembled exceedingly, and said, Who was it then who hunted wild game and brought it to me? And I ate all of it before you came, and I have blessed him. Yes, he is blessed. When Esaw heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, Bless me too, O my father. And he said, Your brother came with deceit and took your blessing. And Esaw said, Was his name, then, called Yaakov? For he has caught me by the heel these 2 times. He took my birthright, and see, now he has taken my blessing. And he said, Have you not reserved a blessing for me? Then Yitschaq answered and said to Esaw, See, I have made him your master. And all his brothers I have given to him as servants. And I have sustained him with grain and wine. And what, then, shall I do for you, my son? And Esaw said to his father, Have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, O my father. And Esaw lifted up his voice and wept. And Yitschaq his father answered and said to him, See, your dwelling is of the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of the heavens from above. And by your sword you are to live, and serve your brother. And it shall be, when you grow restless, that you shall break his yoke from your neck. And Esaw hated Yaakov because of the blessing with which his father blessed him, and Esaw said in his heart, The days of mourning for my father draw near, then I am going to kill my brother Yaakov. And the words of Esaw her older son were reported to Ribkah, and she sent and called Yaakov her younger son, and said to him, See, your brother Esaw comforts himself concerning you, to kill you. And now, my son, listen to my voice, and rise, flee to my brother Laban in Charan. And stay with him a few days, until your brother's wrath turns away, until your brother's displeasure turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. And I shall send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereaved of you both in one day? And Ribkah said to Yitschaq, I am disgusted with my life because of the daughters of Cheth. If Yaakov takes a wife from the daughters of Cheth, like these who are the daughters of the land, what is my life to me? Genesis chapter 28 verses 1 to 22. And Yitschaq called Yaakov and blessed him, and commanded him, and said to him, Do not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Paddan Aram, to the house of Bethuel your mother's father. And take a wife for yourself from there, from the daughters of Laban your mother's brother. And El Shaddai bless you, and make you fruitful and increase you, and you shall become an assembly of peoples, and give you the blessing of Abraham, to you and your seed with you, so that you inherit the land of your sojournings, which Elohim gave to Abraham. So Yitschaq sent Yaakov away, and he went to Paddan Aram, to Laban son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Ribkah, the mother of Yaakov and Esaw. And Esaw saw that Yitschaq had blessed Yaakov and sent him away to Paddan Aram to take himself a wife from there, and that as he blessed him he gave him a command, saying, Do not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan, and that Yaakov had obeyed his father and his mother and had gone to Paddan Aram. So Esaw saw that the daughters of Canaan did not please his father Yitschaq, and Esaw went to Ishmael and took Machalath the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth, to be his wife, besides the wives he had. And Yaakov went out from Beersheba and went toward Charan, and he came upon a place and stopped over for the night, for the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed and saw a ladder set up on the earth, and its top reached to the heavens, and saw messengers of Elohim going up and coming down on it. And see, Yahweh stood above it and said, I am Yahweh Elohim of Abraham your father and the Elohim of Yitschaq. The land on which you are lying, I give it to you and your seed. And your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall break forth to the west and to the east, to the north and the south. And all the clans of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your seed. And see, I am with you and shall guard you wherever you go, and shall bring you back to this land. For I am not going to leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. And Yaakov awoke from his sleep and said, Truly, Yahweh is in this place. And I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of Elohim, and this is the gate of the heavens. And Yaakov rose early in the morning, and took the stone that he had put at his head. set it up as a standing column, and poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of that place Beth-el. However, the name of that city had been Luz previously. And Yaakov made a vow, saying, Seeing Elohim is with me, and has kept me in this way that I am going, and has given me bread to eat and a garment to put on, when I have returned to my father's house in peace, and Yahweh has been my Elohim. Then this stone which I have set as a standing column shall be Elohim's house, and of all that you give me, I shall certainly give a tenth to you. In our last Torah reading, we explored Genesis chapter 25, where we witnessed the death of Abraham and the birth of Yitschaq's twin sons, Yaakov and Esaw. We were given a brief glimpse into the personalities of these two brothers and saw how Esaw despised and sold his birthright, setting the stage for a conflict that would shape generations to come. This brings us now to Genesis chapter 26. It may surprise us to learn that this is the only chapter in Scripture devoted primarily to Yitschaq. In many ways, Yitschaq stands between two towering figures, his father Abraham and his son Yaakov. As a result, he is often overshadowed by both. Yet Yahweh devoted an entire chapter to Yitschaq's life, and that alone tells us there is something important here for us to learn. At first glance, Genesis chapter 26 can seem almost out of place. Why is this chapter inserted here, seemingly interrupting the unfolding story of Yaakov and Esaw just as their rivalry begins to develop? What is Yahweh teaching us through Yitschaq's experiences, and why was this account preserved for future generations? With those questions in mind, let us dive into the text and discover the treasures Yahweh has placed before us. Genesis chapter 26 verses 1 to 6, And there was a scarcity of food in the land, besides the first scarcity of food which was in the days of Abraham. And Yitschaq went to Abimelech, sovereign of the Philistines, in Gerar. And Yahweh appeared to him and said, Do not go down to Mitzrayim, live in the land which I command you. Sojourn in this land. And I shall be with you and bless you, for I give all these lands to you and your seed. And I shall establish the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. And I shall increase your seed like the stars of the heavens, and I shall give all these lands to your seed. And in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and guarded my charge, my commands, my laws, and my Torah. And Yitschaq dwelt in Gerar. Genesis chapter 26 opens with a severe famine in the land. Scripture makes it clear that this was not the same famine that occurred during Abraham's lifetime. That earlier famine drove Abraham into Egypt, where events unfolded involving Pharaoh and Sarah, resulting in Yahweh intervening on Abraham's behalf. Now a new generation faces a similar test. Yitschaq also finds himself living through difficult circumstances, and he travels to Gerar, where Abimelech ruled over the Philistines. We may remember that Abraham likewise interacted with a ruler named Abimelech many years before. Since several decades have passed, this is likely not the same individual. It may have been a descendant, or perhaps Abimelech functioned as a royal title passed down from one ruler to another, much like the repeated use of names among kings in other nations. As Yitschaq considers his next move, Yahweh appears to him with a clear instruction: do not go down to Egypt. Instead, remain in the land that Yahweh would direct him to inhabit. The Hebrew idea behind this command carries the sense of dwelling or residing as a temporary sojourner, placing one's trust in Yahweh while living in a land that is not yet fully possessed. This command required faith. Egypt was known throughout the region as a dependable source of food during times of scarcity. From a human perspective, traveling there would have seemed like the sensible solution. Yet Yahweh called Yitschaq to trust his provision rather than rely on what appeared secure. Yahweh then reaffirmed the covenant he had established with Abraham. He promised his presence, his blessing, and the inheritance of the land. He declared that Yitschaq's descendants would become numerous and that through his offspring all the nations of the earth would be blessed. The promises given to Abraham were now being personally confirmed to his son. Faced with a choice between human wisdom and divine instruction, Yitschaq chose obedience. He did not journey to Egypt. Instead, he remained in Gerar just as Yahweh commanded. Abraham demonstrated faith by leaving the familiar and following Yahweh into the unknown. Yitschaq demonstrated faith by staying where Yahweh told him to remain when every circumstance suggested he should leave. Though their situations were different, both men honored Yahweh through trusting obedience, and both experienced the blessings that accompany walking in his ways. Genesis chapter 26 verses 7 to 11. And when the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, She is my sister. For he was afraid to say, "She is my wife," thinking, "Lest the men of the place should kill me for Ribkah, because she is good-looking." And it came to be, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, sovereign of the Philistines, looked through a window. And he watched and saw Yitschaq playing with Ribkah his wife. So Abimelech called Yitschaq and said, "See, truly she is your wife. So how could you say, 'She is my sister'?" And Yitschaq said to him, "Because I said, 'Lest I die on account of her.'" And Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of the people had almost lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us." And Abimelech commanded all his people, saying, "He who touches this man or his wife shall certainly be put to death." Whatever sense of security Yitschaq may have felt in Gerar was short-lived. Before long, the people noticed Ribkah's beauty and began asking questions about her. Once again, we find ourselves looking at a situation that closely mirrors an earlier event in Abraham's life. Years before, Abraham had said that Sarah was his sister because he feared that others might kill him in order to take his wife. Now Yitschaq faces a similar fear. The danger Yitschaq perceived was not imaginary. Violence, theft, and the taking of women by powerful men were realities in the ancient world. His concern was understandable. One day Abimelech observed Yitschaq and Ribkah together and realized that they were husband and wife. The Hebrew word used in the text carries the idea of affectionate and intimate behavior between a husband and wife. Interestingly, the word is related to Yitschaq's own name, which means laughter. Abimelech immediately confronted Yitschaq. He pointed out the serious consequences that could have, had one of the people taken Ribkah, they would have unknowingly committed a grave offense. Once again, as in Abraham's day, we find a pagan ruler rebuking one of Yahweh's covenant people for acting unwisely. And since Yahweh never rebuked Yitschaq, there is no reason for us in modern day to do the same. That should cause us to pause and reflect. The text suggests that Abimelech and his people possessed an awareness of Yahweh and of moral responsibility. They understood that right and wrong were not merely human inventions. Even without the scriptures as we know them today, they recognized that certain actions brought guilt and judgment. This truth is echoed by Paulos in Romans chapter 1 verses 19 to 21, where he explains that Yahweh has revealed himself through his creation. Because that which is known of Elohim is manifest among them, for Elohim has manifested it to them. For since the creation of the world his invisible qualities have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, both his everlasting power and mightiness, for them to be without excuse, because, although they knew Elohim, they did not esteem him as Elohim, nor gave thanks, but became vain in their reasonings, and their undiscerning heart was darkened. Romans chapter 1 verses 19 to 21. The heavens, the earth, and the order of the universe testify to his existence and power. Humanity can observe the world around them and recognize that there is a creator. As a result, people are accountable for how they respond to that knowledge. Romans also teaches that Yahweh's moral law is reflected in the human conscience. While people may suppress that knowledge or rebel against it, the awareness remains. Abimelech's reaction illustrates this principle. Though he was pagan, he still recognized basic moral truth and feared the consequences of violating it. The lesson for us is significant. If people living in ancient times could recognize Yahweh's existence and understand fundamental moral obligations through the witness of creation and conscience, how much more accountable are we today? We have access to the scriptures, centuries of teaching, and more information than any generation before us. As Yahushua taught, to whom much is given, much will be required. The narrative then shifts to Yahweh's blessing upon Yitschaq. Despite his shortcomings, Yitschaq remained in the land as Yahweh commanded. He planted crops during a time of famine and harvested an extraordinary return. Yahweh prospered him greatly, and his wealth increased until he became one of the most influential men in the region. His flocks multiplied, his servants increased, his possessions grew. The blessing of Yahweh became so evident that the Philistines began to envy him. Their jealousy eventually turned hostile. They filled in the wells that Abraham's servants had dug years earlier. In that region, wells were not a luxury, they were essential for life and survival. Blocking them was a serious act intended to hinder Yitschaq's success and weaken his position. As tensions continued to rise, Abimelech approached Yitschaq with an unexpected request. The same ruler who had once commanded his people not to harm Yitschaq now asked him to leave the area. Whether this was due to pressure from his people, fear of Yitschaq's growing influence, or concern about escalating conflict, the text does not say. We can only speculate. What the passage does reveal is something timeless about human nature. When people witness Yahweh blessing someone else, they have a choice. They can learn from the person's faithfulness, or they can allow jealousy to take root in their hearts. Unfortunately, envy often leads people to resentment rather than reflection. Yet Yitschaq's prosperity was not the result of luck or manipulation. It was the fruit of Yahweh's blessing upon a man who chose to remain where Yahweh had called him, even during a famine. His success serves as a reminder that obedience does not always produce immediate comfort, but in Yahweh's timing it often produces blessings far greater than we could have imagined. Genesis chapter 26 verse 17-23, So Yitschaq went from there and pitched his tent in the Wadi Jerah, and dwelt there. And Yitschaq dug again the wells of water which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham. And he called them by the names which his father had called them. But when Yitschaq's servants dug in the wadi and found a well of running water there, the herdsmen of Jerah strove with Yitschaq's herdsmen, saying, The water is ours. And he called the name of the well Esaw, because they strove with him. And they dug another well, and they strove over that one too, and he called its name Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not strive over it. And he called its name Rehoboth, and said, For now Yahweh has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. And from there he went up to Beersheba. So Yitschaq submits to the expulsion from the land with apparently no argument. He digs again the wells that Abraham had dug, but the men of Jerah came and laid claim to them. Amazingly, Yitschaq, without any protest, moves again. The same thing happens again. Maybe Yitschaq simply doesn't want to be rash in waging war, and is trusting in Yahweh to give him the land at the right time. But finally, Yitschaq digs a well that is not contested. He digs this well in Rehoboth, which is about 20 miles from Beersheba, and even today, there are several large wells of great antiquity in that area. Ger means lodging place or temporary dwelling, and Esaw means contention, Sitnah means hostility, accusation, or enmity. This is a message that Yahweh leads his people to living water. But the journey is often marked by contention and accusation before peace is found. The temporary dwellings of this world may strive over the blessings Yahweh gives, yet his servants do not need to remain in conflict. By trusting him and continuing forward, he brings them into a broad place where there is room to flourish. The names together reveal that those who patiently endure opposition and refuse to be overcome by strife will ultimately find the spacious provision that Yahweh has prepared for them. Genesis chapter 26 verse 24-25, And Yahweh appeared to him the same night and said, I am the Elohim of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you, and shall bless you and increase your seed for my servant Abraham's sake. And he built a slaughter place there, and called on the name of Yahweh. And he pitched his tent there, and the servants of Yitschaq dug a well there. So Yitschaq goes to Beersheba, where Yahweh appears to him. Now this is the site of Abraham's covenant with the Philistines. But Yahweh establishes again the fact that he is the same one who spoke with his father Abraham. Yahweh also emphasizes the succession from Abraham the father to Yitschaq the son as the recipient of Yahweh's special blessing and relationship. Yahweh tells Yitschaq to, do not fear. This is one of the most often repeated, if not the most often repeated, phrases from Yahweh to man. Oftentimes in Scripture, whether it is Yahweh or a messenger, when men see them they fall on their knees, afraid, unable to stand, unable to speak. And so they are told to not be afraid. And so when we are under covenant relationship with Yahweh, we too need to not to be afraid of Yahweh, because it is he that keeps us and not ourselves. We can rely on his strength and take courage in this and know that he is the good shepherd and protect those he calls his own. Amen. Genesis chapter 26 verses 26-33, And Abimelech came to him from Jerah, with Achuzzath, one of his friends, and Pichol the commander of his army. And Yitschaq said to them, Why have you come to me, seeing you have hated me and have sent me away from you? But they said, We have clearly seen that Yahweh is with you. And we said, Please, let there be an oath between us, between you and us. And let us make a covenant with you, that you do no evil to us, as we have not touched you, and as we have done only good toward you, and have sent you away in peace. You are now blessed by Yahweh. And he made him a feast, and they ate and drank. And they rose early in the morning and swore an oath with one another. And Yitschaq let them go, and they departed from him in peace. And on the same day it came to be that the servants of Yitschaq came and informed him about the well which they had dug, and said to him, We have found water. so he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. And with Yitschaq being prosperous, Abimelech grew uneasy with it. He goes out to meet Yitschaq, and brings with him his adviser, as well as the commander of his army. Achuzeth, possession, or, held firmly, one of Yitschaq's friends, and Pickle, mouth of all, or, spokesman for all, together reveal an important lesson about relationships and reconciliation. Possession speaks of what is held onto, while the spokesman represents words spoken on behalf of others. When we put the names together, we see it is when Yahweh blesses his people, even former adversaries may seek peace. True friendship is not built on holding tightly to possessions or positions, nor on persuasive words alone, but on recognizing Yahweh's hand at work. The names remind us that what we hold should be surrendered to him, and what we speak should promote peace. Today, we are called to let our words become instruments of reconciliation, trusting that Yahweh can restore relationships and establish lasting peace where there was once conflict. And since Abimelech, the king, initiates the agreement, this implies that Yitschaq is now the stronger party. As the chapter draws to a close, Abimelech makes a remarkable confession. He openly acknowledges that Yahweh has been with Yitschaq and that his blessing is unmistakable. From a human perspective, forcing Yitschaq away from the fertile region should have weakened him. Instead, wherever Yitschaq went, Yahweh continued to prosper him. Abimelech could no longer deny that Yahweh's hand rested upon him. Because of this, Abimelech sought peace. He asked Yitschaq to enter into a covenant, promising that neither side would bring harm to the other. He even claimed that his people had treated Yitschaq well and expected the same in return. That statement is somewhat ironic. While it is true that Abimelech had previously protected Yitschaq and Ribkah by warning his people not to harm them, it was also under his rule that Abraham's wells had been stopped up and rendered useless. Those actions had created unnecessary hardship for Yitschaq's household. Nevertheless, Yitschaq chose the path of peace rather than revenge. Instead of holding on to bitterness, he agreed to establish peaceful relations with those who had opposed him. His actions remind us that those who trust Yahweh do not have to fight every battle themselves. They can leave justice in his hands. The chapter then concludes with two brief verses that may seem disconnected from everything that has come before. And when Esaw was 40 years old, he took as wives Jehudath the daughter of Beri the Chittite, and Basemath the daughter of Elon the Chittite. And they were bitterness of spirit to Yitschaq and Ribkah. Jehudath, woman of praise, daughter of Beri, my well, or man of the well, the Chittite, one trembling in fear, and Basemath, fragrance, or sweet perfume, daughter of Elon, oak, or strong tree, the Chittite, together form a sobering lesson. Outwardly, their names speak of praise, provision, fragrance, and strength, yet they came from a people characterized by fear rather than covenant faithfulness. Not everything that appears praiseworthy, refreshing, fragrant, or strong is rooted in Yahweh. The names remind us that outward beauty, pleasantness, and natural strength can conceal a foundation that does not fear Yahweh rightly. Today, we are called to look beyond appearances and choose relationships and influences that are grounded in covenant faithfulness, remembering that true praise, true refreshment, and true strength are found only in walking with Yahweh. At first glance, these verses appear almost like an afterthought, yet they serve an important purpose by preparing us for the events of Genesis chapter 27. Esau's decision to marry women from the surrounding Canaanite peoples revealed something about his heart. Rather than valuing the covenant identity of his family, he pursued relationships without regard for the spiritual consequences. Earlier, Esaw demonstrated little appreciation for his birthright. Now his choice of wives further confirms that the covenant promises meant very little to him. The expression, bitterness of spirit, is especially significant. It describes deep grief and continual sorrow brought upon Yitschaq and Ribkah. The issue was not merely cultural differences but spiritual ones. The Chittite peoples practiced beliefs and customs that stood in direct contrast to the worship of Yahweh. Their influence threatened the spiritual health and identity of the covenant family. Throughout Genesis chapter 26, one central truth shines brightly: Yahweh remains faithful to his promises even when the enemies of his people aren't. That same truth encourages us today. We live in a world filled with uncertainty. We see moral confusion, political unrest, economic concerns, and countless reasons to become discouraged. We may worry about the future of our families, our communities, and the generations that will come after us. Yet Genesis chapter 26 reminds us that Yahweh has never lost control of history. The circumstances around us may change, but Yahweh does not. The opposition we face may be real, but his promises remain sure. People may close one door, but Yahweh is able to open another. Our responsibility is the same as Yitschaq's, to remain faithful where Yahweh has placed us, to trust him even when the future is uncertain, and to remember that no obstacle is greater than his ability to fulfill every promise he has spoken. May we walk away from this chapter with renewed confidence that the Elohim of Abraham, Yitschaq, and Yaakov is still governing his creation, still keeping his covenant, and still working all things according to his perfect will. He is worthy of our trust today just as he was thousands of years ago. With Genesis chapter 26 behind us, we now arrive at one of the most well-known and dramatic accounts in the book of Genesis, the blessing of Yaakov. This chapter is filled with family tension, deception, prophecy, and the unfolding of Yahweh's sovereign plan. It raises important questions about faith, favoritism, human weakness, and divine purpose. As we read through these events, we will discover that even when people make flawed decisions, Yahweh remains faithful to accomplish his covenant promises. So, with that in mind, let us turn our attention to Genesis chapter 27 and carefully examine this remarkable account of Yitschaq's blessing of Yaakov. As always, let's allow the scriptures to speak for themselves and see what Yahweh desires to teach us through this pivotal moment in Yisrael's history. Genesis chapter 27 verses 1 to 4. And it came to be, when Yitschaq was old and his eyes were too dim to see, that he called Esaw his elder son and said to him, My son. And he answered him, Here I am. And he said, See now, I am old, I do not know the day of my death. Now then, please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt wild game for me. And make me a tasty dish, such as I love, and bring it to me to eat, in order that my being does bless you before I die. Genesis chapter 27 opens with a scene that gives the impression Yitschaq believes his life is drawing to a close. Feeling the weight of old age, he prepares to pass the family blessing on to his eldest son before he dies. If we follow the timeline carefully, however, Yitschaq is likely around 100 years old at this point. He was 60 when Yaakov and Esaw were born, and Esaw was 40 when he married Chittite women. Although Yitschaq believes death may be near, we know from later passages that he will live for many more years. His concern is understandable, but his death is not as imminent as he assumes. The text also tells us that Yitschaq's eyesight had grown dim. They say that when you lose certain senses that you gain a heightened sense in another area. This may be the case with Yitschaq. Yitschaq calls for Esaw, and Esaw answers, Here am I. This familiar expression communicates readiness and respect. It is the same response Abraham gave when Yahweh called him. The phrase carries the idea of, I am here and ready to listen. It is important to remember that Scripture never portrays Esaw as completely evil. He clearly loved and honored his father, and Yitschaq deeply loved him in return. The issue was not whether Esaw possessed admirable qualities, but whether he valued the covenant Yahweh had established with Abraham. The covenant required more than family affection or natural ability. It required a heart that treasured Yahweh's promises. Yitschaq explains that he does not know when he will die, whether because of weakness, illness, or simply the limitations of old age. He believes the time has come to pronounce the family blessing. Later in the chapter we find that he is unable to rise without assistance, confirming that his health had significantly declined. He then instructs Esaw to take his hunting equipment, go into the countryside, bring back game, and prepare the meal that he enjoys before receiving the blessing. There is an interesting contrast here. Earlier in Genesis, Esaw surrendered his birthright for a single meal. Now Yitschaq is preparing to bestow the covenant blessing after another meal. Esaw was a man of the flesh and temporary. That should challenge each of us. How often do temporary comforts distract us from eternal priorities? The things of this world satisfy only for a moment, but Yahweh's promises endure forever. As Yahushua reminds us in Mark chapter 8 verse 36. For what shall it profit a man, if he shall gain the whole world, and lose his own soul? Yitschaq tells Esaw to prepare the meal, so that my soul may bless you. The Hebrew expression emphasizes that this blessing comes from the very depth of Yitschaq's being. More importantly, this was not merely a father's personal wish. Yahweh himself would work through Yitschaq's words to establish the covenant blessing for the next generation. Understanding the significance of this blessing is essential. In the ancient world, the father's blessing established the family's future leadership. The son who received it inherited not only material possessions but also authority, responsibility, and the privilege of leading the family after his father's death. For Abraham's family, however, this blessing carried an even greater significance. Whoever received it would become the heir of Yahweh's covenant promises. The chosen son would continue the line through which Yahweh's redemptive plan would unfold. This makes Esau's actions all the more remarkable. Earlier, he had willingly sold his birthright because he considered it of little value. Now, as the moment of blessing approaches, he says nothing. He could have confessed to Yitschaq that he had already exchanged his birthright for a bowl of stew. Instead, he remains silent and proceeds as though nothing had happened. Now, faced with the possibility of losing everything, Esaw appears to desire the blessing after all. But wanting the blessings of Yahweh is not the same as valuing Yahweh himself. Esaw desired the inheritance, yet he had shown little desire for the covenant life that accompanied it. Yahweh had already revealed his purpose before the twins were even born, declaring to Ribkah that the older shall serve the younger. There is every reason to believe Ribkah shared this revelation with Yitschaq. Yet despite Yahweh's clear word, Yitschaq still intends to bless Esaw. It could be that Yitschaq knew what was going on but was testing the boy's heart in the matter. And that Esaw failed this test and Yaakov passed it, thus receiving the blessing as a result. The tension in this chapter, therefore, is not simply between two brothers. It is between human preference and Yahweh's sovereign purpose. Genesis chapter 27 verses 5 to 13, and Ribkah heard when Yitschaq spoke to Esaw his son. And Esaw went to the field to hunt wild game and to bring it. And Ribkah spoke to Yaakov her son, saying, See, I heard your father speak to Esaw your brother, saying, Bring me wild game and make me a tasty dish to eat. And bless you in the presence of Yahweh before my death. And now my son, listen to my voice according to what I command you. Please go to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, and I make a tasty dish from them for your father, such as he loves. And you shall take it to your father, and he shall eat it, so that he might bless you before his death. And Yaakov said to Ribkah his mother, See, Esaw my brother is a hairy man. And I am a smooth-skinned man. What if my father touches me? Then I shall be like a deceiver in his eyes, and shall bring a curse on myself and not a blessing. But his mother said to him, Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice, and go, get them for me. The tension in the narrative now begins to build. Ribkah overhears the conversation between Yitschaq and Esaw and immediately recognizes the seriousness of what is about to happen. She understands that if nothing changes, Yitschaq intends to pronounce the covenant blessing upon Esaw. Knowing the revelation Yahweh had given her years earlier, that the older would serve the younger, she concludes that action must be taken. When she speaks to Yaakov, she tells Yaakov that Yitschaq intends to bless Esaw before Yahweh. Ribkah emphasizes the sacred nature of the blessing and to convince Yaakov that there is no time to hesitate. Ribkah believes Yahweh's purposes depend upon her intervention. She believed that Yahweh's word does not return void as Yeshayahu tells us. So shall my word be that goes forth from my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing wherever I sent it. Isaiah chapter 55 verse 11. It is possible that both parents understood this plan to bless Yaakov instead of Esaw and were instructed by Yahweh to execute this plan to test the boys' hearts to see who wanted the blessing more, Esaw or Yaakov. She instructs Yaakov to bring her 2 young goats so she can prepare a meal that tastes like the wild game Yitschaq loves. Yaakov will then present the food to his father while pretending to be Esaw, hoping to receive the blessing himself. Interestingly, our English translations can soften Ribkah's tone. The Hebrew verb carries the force of a command. She is not offering a suggestion or inviting discussion. She is directing her son to obey. Yaakov participates and he points out the obvious problem. Esaw is covered with hair, while he himself has smooth skin. If Yitschaq examines him closely, the deception will quickly fall apart. There is another interesting observation in Yaakov's words. He says that he may appear to be deceiving his father. Ribkah then responds with remarkable determination. If a curse comes, let it fall upon me, my son. Only do what I have told you. Whether her judgment was correct or not, her courage cannot be questioned. She was willing to bear the consequences herself because she believed she was acting in accordance with Yahweh's earlier revelation. The narrative then moves quickly. Yaakov obeys his mother's instructions. The Hebrew text uses three brief verbs in succession: he went, he took, he brought. The pace of the language almost allows us to feel Yaakov's anxiety. He acts quickly, perhaps hoping to finish the task before fear has time to overtake him. Rivka prepares the meal exactly as Yitschaq likes it. She then dresses Yaakov in Esau's finest garments, likely clothing reserved for special occasions. Finally, she fastens the skins of the young goats around his hands and neck so that, if Yitschaq reaches out to touch him, he will feel like his older brother. Everything is now prepared. Yaakov takes the meal into his father's tent, and one of the most dramatic encounters in Genesis is about to begin. Genesis chapter 27 verses 18 to 25. And he went to his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am." "Who are you, my son?" And Yaakov said to his father, "I am Esau your firstborn, I have done as you said to me. Please rise, sit and eat of my wild game, so that your being might bless me." But Yitschaq said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" And he said, "Because Yahweh your Elohim brought it to me." Then Yitschaq said to Yaakov, "Please come near, so that I feel you, my son, whether you truly are my son Esau or not." Yaakov went near to Yitschaq his father. And he felt him and said, "The voice is the voice of Yaakov, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. And he blessed him. And he said, "Are you truly my son Esau?" And he said, "I am." And he said, "Bring it near to me, and let me eat of my son's wild game, so that my being might bless you." So he brought it near to him, and he ate. And he brought him wine, and he drank. With everything now prepared, Yaakov follows his mother's instructions and enters his father's tent. The tension in the scene is almost tangible. It seems that Yaakov is still nervous about what he is about to do. When he first speaks, he simply says, "My father." That is all. His brief greeting stands in contrast to Esau's later entrance in verse 31, where Esau speaks much more freely. Perhaps Yaakov is intentionally keeping his words to a minimum, hoping that saying less will reduce the chance that Yitschaq recognizes his voice. Immediately, Yitschaq asks an important question: "Who are you, my son?" This is a reasonable question. Although Yitschaq's eyesight has failed, his hearing and judgment have not. He wants confirmation before proceeding with something as significant as the covenant blessing. Rather than acting carelessly, he begins testing the identity of the person standing before him. Yaakov answers, "I am Esau, your firstborn." From this point forward, there is no stopping the plan. Once again, Yitschaq may not have been completely unaware of what Yaakov was doing. And although he loved Esau, he knew that ultimately Yahweh's covenant would continue through Yaakov. He may have been the originator of the plan, since he is after all Abraham's son, and we do know that Abraham was alive when the twins were born and even alive until they were about 15 years of age. So not out of the realm of possibility that this was a plan that was 40 years in the making for both Yitschaq and Rivka. The first thing that raises Yitschaq's suspicion is the speed with which the meal has been prepared. Esau has supposedly gone out into the wilderness, hunted wild game, returned home, prepared the food, and brought it back, all in an unusually short amount of time. So Yitschaq asks, "How is it that you found it so quickly, my son?" At this point, Yaakov replies, "Because Yahweh your Elohim brought it to me." Yitschaq remains unconvinced. After listening to Yaakov's answer, he asks him to come closer. "Come near, that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not." Notice the progression. First, Yitschaq tests him with a question. Next, he listens carefully to his voice. Now he wants physical confirmation. When Yaakov comes near, Yitschaq touches the goatskins covering his hands and neck. Then comes one of the most memorable statements in all of Genesis. The voice is Yaakov's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. This single sentence captures the entire tension of the chapter. Everything about the situation sends mixed signals. Yet even amid all the confusion, Yahweh's covenant purposes remain firmly in his hands. Genesis chapter 27 verses 26 to 29. And his father Yitschaq said to him, "Please come near and kiss me, my son." And he came near and kissed him. And he smelled the smell of his garments, and blessed him and said, "See, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which Yahweh has blessed. And Elohim give you of the dew of the heavens, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you." Be master over your brothers, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be those cursing you, and blessed be those blessing you. Although Yitschaq has now heard Yaakob's voice and felt the hairy skin on his hands, he is still not completely convinced. One final test remains. He tells Yaakov, "Come near now, and kiss me, my son." This kiss may have simply been a customary part of pronouncing a father's blessing. There may also have been another reason for Yitschaq's request. By bringing Yaakov close, Yitschaq could make use of the one sense he had not yet relied upon, his sense of smell. As Yaakov leaned in, Yitschaq noticed the scent of his garments. He declared that the smell reminded him of an open field blessed by Yahweh. This detail is significant. Yaakov spent much of his time caring for sheep and livestock. Naturally, his own clothing would have carried the familiar odors of the flock. Esau, however, was a hunter and a man of the countryside. His garments would have carried the scent of the wilderness, the fields, and the outdoors. Ribkah had anticipated this from the very beginning. She did not simply disguise Yaakov's appearance. She prepared for every question Yitschaq might ask and every test he might perform. First came the voice, then the identity, next came the touch, finally came the smell. Yitschaq was carefully using every remaining sense available to him in an effort to determine whether this truly was Esau. In that respect, he was exercising caution rather than carelessness. At the same time, Ribkah had thoughtfully accounted for each one of those tests. She understood that although Yitschaq could no longer see, he would naturally rely more heavily on his hearing, his touch, and even his sense of smell. The disguise was designed to deceive every one of those remaining senses. Convinced at last that this is the son of promise just as he was, Yitschaq proceeds to pronounce the blessing. With these words, Yaakov receives not only the inheritance of his father, but also the covenant promises first given to Abraham and then confirmed to Yitschaq. The blessing was never merely about wealth or family leadership. It carried the responsibility of preserving Yahweh's covenant and becoming the instrument through whom his redemptive purposes would continue. There is an important pattern emerging throughout Genesis. The surrounding cultures generally expected the firstborn son to inherit the family's leadership, authority, and privileges. Birth order determined succession, whether within a household or even among kings. Yet Yahweh repeatedly demonstrates that his purposes are not limited by human customs. We have already seen this principle with Yitschaq, who became the child of promise instead of Ishmael. Now Yaakov receives the covenant instead of Esau. Later, Joseph will receive a place of prominence among his brothers despite not being the eldest. Moshe will become Yisrael's great deliverer even though Aharon is the older brother. Eventually, Yahweh will choose David, the youngest of Yishai's sons, to become king over Yisrael. Again and again, Scripture reminds us that Yahweh's choices are not governed by human expectations or cultural traditions. Yahweh does not choose people simply because of their position, status, or birth order. He looks far deeper. As Yahweh later tells Shemuel, man looks on the outward appearance, but Yahweh looks on the heart. 1 Samuel chapter 16 verse 7. That truth runs throughout the entire Bible. Yahweh is not impressed by human rank, family privilege, or worldly qualifications. He calls and equips those whom he chooses according to his own wisdom and purposes. Genesis chapter 27 verses 30 to 36. And it came to be, as soon as Yitschaq had finished blessing Yaakov, and Yaakov had hardly left the presence of Yitschaq his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. And he too had made a tasty dish and brought it to his father, and said to his father, Let my father rise and eat of his son's wild game, so that your being might bless me. And his father Yitschaq said to him, Who are you? And he said, I am your son, your firstborn, Esau. Then Yitschaq trembled exceedingly, and said, Who was it then who hunted wild game and brought it to me? And I ate all of it before you came, and I have blessed him. Yes, he is blessed. When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, Bless me too, O my father. And he said, Your brother came with deceit and took your blessing. And Esau said, Was his name, then, called Yaakov? For he has caught me by the heel these 2 times. He took my birthright, and see, now he has taken my blessing. And he said, Have you not reserved a blessing for me? The drama reaches its climax almost immediately. No sooner has Yaakov left his father's presence than Esau returns from the hunt. He has done exactly what Yitschaq requested. He has tracked down the game, prepared the meal, and eagerly brings it to his father, expecting to receive the blessing that he believes awaits him. Confidently he says, "Let my father arise, and eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me." What happens next changes everything. Instead of welcoming Esaw, Yitschaq asks a startling question: "Who are you?" Think about that for a moment. Yitschaq does not respond as though he simply forgot who was in the room. He had every reason to believe Esaw had already come and gone. And now deep down inside he knew that possibly it was Yaakov who came in to receive the blessing. When Esaw answers, "I am your son, your firstborn, Esaw," the truth crashes into Yitschaq all at once. The scriptures tell us that Yitschaq trembled very violently. This is far more than a mild surprise. The Hebrew emphasizes an intense physical shaking. Why was he trembling? The text does not tell us directly, so we should avoid being overly dogmatic. Perhaps he suddenly recognized that, despite all his efforts to bless Esaw, Yahweh's purpose had prevailed exactly as he had declared years before. This moment marks a turning point. Reality has arrived. No amount of personal preference can overturn the will of Yahweh. Yitschaq then asks, "Who then was it that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate of it before you came, and I blessed him." Then he adds these remarkable words, "Yes, and he shall be blessed." Those final words are significant. Yitschaq does not attempt to revoke the blessing. He does not call Yaakov back to reverse what has happened. Instead, he accepts the outcome. In the ancient world, a solemn patriarchal blessing carried tremendous weight. Once spoken, it was regarded as binding and irreversible. More importantly, this was not merely Yitschaq's personal wish. Yahweh himself was working through these events to accomplish his covenant purposes. Although Yitschaq intended to bless Esaw, Yahweh ensured that the covenant blessing rested upon the one he had chosen before the twins were ever born. At that moment, Yitschaq appears to recognize that what has happened cannot, and should not, be undone. Esaw's reaction is equally powerful. This rugged outdoorsman, the skilled hunter who spent his days in the wilderness, is completely broken. The text says he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry. His grief is raw and overwhelming. He pleads with his father, "Bless me, even me also, O my father." The scene is heartbreaking, yet it also reveals an important truth. Esaw desperately wants the blessing, but earlier he had shown little regard for the birthright that carried it. Years before, he willingly exchanged his birthright for a single meal because satisfying his immediate hunger seemed more important than preserving his covenant inheritance. Now the consequences of that decision have arrived. One of the recurring lessons of Scripture is that our choices often seem insignificant in the moment, yet they can shape the course of our lives for years to come. Yitschaq answers Esaw with painful honesty, "Your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing." Esaw immediately responds, "Is he not rightly named Yaakov? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and now he has taken away my blessing." Esaw is making a play on Yaakov's name. He associates it with a Hebrew word suggesting someone who supplants or overtakes another. In some ancient Semitic traditions, the name could even carry the idea of one who deceives. From Esaw's perspective, his brother's name perfectly describes his actions. But Esaw's accusation deserves closer examination. Notice how Esaw introduced himself only moments earlier. When Yitschaq asked who he was, Esaw did not simply say, "I am Esaw." He answered, "I am your firstborn, Esaw." That additional phrase is important. By calling himself the firstborn, Esaw was laying claim to a position he had already surrendered years earlier when he sold his birthright to Yaakov. In other words, while accusing Yaakov of deception, Esaw himself was attempting to claim privileges that no longer belonged to him. There is another detail that is easy to overlook. Esaw says that Yaakov took away his birthright. But that is not what happened. Yaakov did not steal it. He did not seize it by force. Esaw freely traded it away for a bowl of stew because he considered his immediate appetite more valuable than his covenant inheritance. Now, when the consequences become painful, Esaw shifts the blame. Rather than acknowledging his own choices, he portrays himself as the victim. How often do we do the same? It is easier to blame someone else than to accept responsibility for decisions we willingly made. Ironically, in the middle of his emotional outburst, Esaw reveals something Yitschaq may not have known. By saying that Yaakov had taken his birthright, Esaw effectively admits that the birthright had indeed been transferred. If this is the first time Yitschaq hears about that earlier transaction, then the pieces of the puzzle begin falling into place. He now understands that the blessing has followed the birthright, just as it should have. Even though deception played a role in the events of this chapter, Yahweh's covenant purposes have not been derailed. Human sin has complicated the journey, but it has not altered the destination. What Yahweh declared before the twins were born is now unfolding before everyone's eyes. His purposes stand, because he is faithful to accomplish everything he has promised. We continue on with the last half of verse 36 through verse 40. Then he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Yitschaq answered and said to Esaw, "Behold, I have made him lord over you. And all his brothers I have given to him for servants, and with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son?" Esaw said to his father, "Have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father." And Esaw lifted up his voice and wept. Then Yitschaq his father answered and said to him, "Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother, but when you grow restless you shall break his yoke from your neck." Knowing that the blessing was irreversible, all Esaw could do was ask Yitschaq for an additional blessing. But Yitschaq says that he has already placed Yaakov over him, and blessed him, so what exactly can he do for Esaw? And again, we hear the desperation in Esaw's voice. "Have you but one blessing for me, my father?" And at that, Esaw lifted up his voice and wept. Again, the hunter, this strong man, is reduced to tears and anguish as he begins to reap the consequences of despising his birthright. But Yitschaq blesses Esaw in the only way he can now. But notice that Esaw will live in Edom, away from the fruitful land, the fat of the earth and the dew of the land. Edom was never very fruitful. And even though Edom will survive, it isn't from pastoral or agricultural endeavors. Yitschaq tells Esaw that he will live by the sword. And so for the land of Edom and the Edomites, who were descendants of Esaw, it will survive by raiding its neighbors and plundering caravans that pass by. The Edomites will actually fight against Israel for many years throughout history. Esaw will have a hard life, but he will survive. Esaw and his descendants will survive by hunting people, just as Esaw has survived by hunting game. Finishing out this chapter, verses 41 to 46 read, "Now Esaw hated Yaakov because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him, and Esaw said to himself, 'The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Yaakov.' But the words of Esaw her older son were told to Ribkah. So she sent and called Yaakov her younger son and said to him, 'Behold, your brother Esaw comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban my brother in Charan and stay with him a while, until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereft of you both in one day?' Then Ribkah said to Yitschaq, 'I loathe my life because of the Chittite women. If Yaakov marries one of the Chittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me?' So it is no surprise to learn here that based on everything that has happened, Esaw hated Yaakov and planned to kill him. Only, out of respect for Yitschaq, he would wait until Yitschaq died. Even at his moment of greatest anger and emotion, Esaw had enough respect for his father Yitschaq to not kill Yaakov while Yitschaq was still alive, knowing how much hurt and anguish that would cause Yitschaq. But Ribkah learns of Esaw's plan to kill Yaakov. Somebody told her. Perhaps Esaw could not conceal his anger and hatred, and ended up talking and telling a few people, and word got back to Ribkah. In life, I think there is a truism that is worth remembering: everybody talks to somebody. And so word gets around faster than you might expect. So Ribkah sends for Yaakov and tells him of Esaw's plan to kill him. She tells him to leave, to flee to her brother, Laban's house in Charan, where he would be safe until Esaw's anger has subsided. And after Esaw is no longer angry, after his fury has subsided, she will send for him to come back home. Part of Ribkah's plan here is sensible, to send Yaakov away to her brother's house where he would be safe. However, part of her plan is a little naive, I think. Does she really think Esaw will so quickly forgive and forget? She tells Yaakov to stay there for a while, which, in the Hebrew, actually says, a number of days. I wonder how long Ribkah expected Yaakov would need to stay away. A few weeks, a few months, a year. Maybe this was a bit of wishful thinking on the part of a mother. But we will learn the harsh reality that Yaakov will be gone for 20 years. In fact, Ribka will never see Yaakov again, and so in this way, she tastes the bitter consequences of her deception. When she tells Yaakov to leave, she also says, "Why should I be bereft of you both in one day?" That word bereft, and to lose both of you, in Hebrew means bereaved. What she means is, if Esau carries out his plan to kill Yaakov, she will lose Yaakov. But she will also lose Esau, because murder called for capital punishment, so Esau would have been condemned to death, or killed by the next of kin, an avenger of blood, resulting in Ribka losing both of her sons. Finally, Ribka realizes she needs to get Yitschaq's approval for Yaakov to leave and go to Charan, so she tells him she is disgusted with her life because of Esau's marriage to Chittite women. And so she parlays this into her telling Yitschaq that they need to send Yaakov to Charan to find a wife. In this way, she could hide from Yitschaq the real reason for sending him away, which is that Esau was planning to kill him. Also in Ribka's words here, brilliantly perhaps, she is reminding Yitschaq of Esau's marriage to these pagan women, and of his unworthiness to receive the Abrahamic blessing. Perhaps in a way making Yitschaq feel a little better about inadvertently blessing Yaakov. And as we end this chapter, consider that despite Yitschaq's plan to bless Esau, and even in spite of the fact he may have known Yahweh had elected Yaakov, he ironically blesses Yaakov due to the deception of Ribka and Yaakov, thus bringing about what Yahweh said was going to happen all along. It probably wasn't the way Yahweh would have chosen, with the jealousy, deception, favoritism, and family tension, but as always, Yahweh is able to accomplish his plan despite the presence of all these other factors. Yahweh knew what would happen. Yahweh knew Yaakov would inherit the blessings and promises made to Abraham. And this in spite of Yitschaq's efforts to bless Esau. And if you think Yaakov has gotten away with something here, that Yahweh will not hold him accountable, we will soon see that is absolutely not the case. Yahweh will soon get Yaakov's attention and turn his life around. It really is like a science fiction movie, where the characters try to stop some foretold future, but actually end up causing that very future to come about due to their involvement and attempts to stop it. Meanwhile, Yahweh sits outside of time, seeing the end from the beginning, knowing what each of the characters would do, knowing how it would all end. Just as he does for each of us. We don't always get what we want in life. The answer is sometimes, no, or at least, not right now. There are times in all of our lives when we experience hardships and disappointments that we certainly don't understand at the time. It may be months or even years before we start to get a glimpse of a possible reason. And then for other situations, we may never get an answer to our questions. In those times, we can choose to either dwell on it, to try to live in the present while still being chained to the past. Or we can choose to trust that Yahweh allowed those circumstances in our lives for a reason. We would do well to remember the words found in Isaiah chapter 46 verses 9 to 10 which read, "For I am Yahweh, and there is no other. I am Yahweh, and there is none like me." 10 Declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things not yet done. My counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. Yahweh sees the end from the beginning. Yahweh has a purpose for your life. And one of the greatest joys in life is to discover that purpose, and then start living it. Chapter 28 to 1-9, And Yitschaq called Yaakov and blessed him, and commanded him, and said to him, Do not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Paddan Aram, to the house of Bethuel your mother's father. And take a wife for yourself from there, from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. And El Shaddai bless you, and make you fruitful and increase you, and you shall become an assembly of peoples, and give you the blessing of Abraham, to you and your seed with you. So that you inherit the land of your sojournings, which Elohim gave to Abraham. So Yitschaq sent Yaakov away, and he went to Paddan Aram, to Laban son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Ribka, the mother of Yaakov and Esaw. And Esaw saw that Yitschaq had blessed Yaakov and sent him away to Paddan Aram to take himself a wife from there, and that as he blessed him he gave him a command, saying, Do not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan, and that Yaakov had obeyed his father and his mother and had gone to Paddan Aram. So Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan did not please his father Yitschaq, and Esau went to Ishmael and took Machalath the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth, to be his wife. Besides the wives he had. After blessing Yaakov, Yitschaq immediately gives him a solemn command. He instructs him not to marry one of the daughters of Canaan. This was not merely fatherly advice or a personal preference, it was a direct command. In many ways, Yitschaq was teaching the same principle later expressed by Paulos, Do not become unequally yoked. This command was actually part of the blessing. Yahweh's blessings are never separated from obedience. Walking in his instruction provides protection, direction, and boundaries that preserve his people. The Torah is not a burden designed to restrict us. It is Yahweh's loving instruction that guides us into life. Remaining within those boundaries enables us to enjoy the blessings he desires for his children. Yitschaq sends Yaakov to Paddan Aram, to the household of Laban, Ribkah's brother, so that he may take a wife from among his own relatives rather than from the surrounding Canaanite peoples. By following his father's instructions, Yaakov demonstrates that he values both the covenant and the family through which Yahweh's promises would continue. Esaw notices all of this. He observes that Yaakov has received the covenant blessing and that his parents have specifically instructed him to avoid marrying Canaanite women. Esaw also realizes that his own marriages to Chittite women had deeply grieved Yitschaq and Ribkah. Wanting to improve the situation, Esaw marries another wife, this time from the family of Ishmael. At first glance, his actions may seem sincere. It almost appears that Esaw is finally trying to please his father. Yet even here he fails to understand the heart of the matter. Instead of seeking his parents' counsel or following their instructions, Esaw chooses his own solution. Although marrying within Abraham's extended family may have seemed like a better decision than marrying another Canaanite woman, he was still acting independently rather than in humble obedience. This reveals an important spiritual principle. There is a difference between doing something that appears religious and walking in faithful obedience. Throughout Scripture, Yahweh repeatedly teaches that he desires willing obedience more than outward displays of religion. A person may appear to be making spiritual decisions while still refusing to submit to Yahweh's instructions. Genesis continues to contrast the lives of these two brothers. Yaakov responds to the instructions of his father and mother. Esaw repeatedly follows his own desires. One brother submits, the other insists upon his own way. This contrast reminds us of the wisdom found in Proverbs chapter 6 verse 20. My son, keep your father's commandment, and forsake not the Torah of your mother. That verse beautifully summarizes what we have been witnessing throughout these chapters. A father's commands and a mother's instruction work together to guide a child toward wisdom. Throughout the opening chapters of Proverbs, Shlomo repeatedly addresses his readers as, my son. This affectionate expression reminds us that Yahweh speaks to his people as a loving father who desires the very best for his children. Proverbs chapter 1 warns us not to be enticed by sinners. Proverbs chapter 2 promises wisdom to those who diligently seek it. Proverbs chapter 3 urges us never to forget Yahweh's Torah. Proverbs chapter 4 calls us to hear and embrace our Father's instructions so that we may truly live. Proverbs chapter 5 continues that appeal, urging us to receive his wisdom rather than follow the path of temptation. Then Proverbs chapter 6 once again says, my son, keep your father's commandment, and forsake not the Torah of your mother. The repetition is intentional. Yahweh knows we need continual reminders to remain faithful. The Hebrew word translated, keep, or watch over, is natzah, meaning to guard, preserve, or carefully watch over something of great value. Interestingly, a closely related Hebrew word is netzah, meaning branch, a title later applied prophetically to the Messiah in Isaiah chapter 11 verse 1. And a rod shall come forth from the stump of Yishai. And a sprout from his roots shall be fruitful. This creates a beautiful picture. As branches connected to the true vine, we are continually watched over by Yahweh. Yahushua expressed this same truth in John chapter 15 when he said, abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abides in the vine. Because Yahweh faithfully watches over us, we should likewise guard the treasures he has entrusted to us. One of those treasures is his Torah. The Hebrew word Torah means far more than simply law. It carries the ideas of instruction, teaching, guidance, and divine direction. It comes from a Hebrew verb meaning to point, to direct, or to aim. That gives us a much richer understanding of what Torah truly is. The Torah points us toward Yahweh's ways. Then it teaches us how to walk in those ways. In other words, Torah first shows us the right direction, and then calls us to move faithfully in that direction. That is a very different picture from the common misconception that Torah is merely a list of burdensome rules. Psalm chapter 119 celebrates this truth repeatedly, rejoicing in Yahweh's commandments as a source of wisdom, joy, and life. Ultimately, the Torah points us to Yahushua, the living Word made flesh. As we keep our eyes fixed upon him, he empowers us through his Spirit to walk in the very instruction he has written upon our hearts. The contrast between Yaakov and Esaw continues to illustrate this principle. Esaw eventually came to hate his brother. Even after recognizing his parents' disappointment over his marriages, he still chose a path based upon his own reasoning instead of humble obedience. Rather than seeking Yahweh's direction, he acted according to the desires of the flesh. This serves as a picture of two different ways of living. One life is directed by obedience to Yahweh, the other is governed by human desire. Paulos develops this same contrast in Romans chapter 8 verse 1. There is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Messiah Yahushua, who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. To walk according to the Spirit is to live in joyful submission to Yahweh's instruction. As Paulos reminds us elsewhere, the Torah is spiritual. The Spirit never leads us away from Yahweh's truth. He leads us into it. By contrast, walking according to the flesh means following human wisdom, personal desires, and traditions that replace or distort Yahweh's word. The choice before every believer remains the same today as it was in Genesis. Will we follow our own understanding, or will we trust Yahweh enough to walk in the path he has revealed? May we be like Yaakov in this respect, but willing to obey when Yahweh speaks. For his commands are not given to burden us, but to guide us safely into the life he has prepared for those who love him. Yaakov takes his first few steps out into the world on his own, without his parents to guide him or protect him. Later on in the Yaakov, Esaw narrative, we will learn from Yaakov's own mouth the poverty in which he crossed the wilderness. Let us compare the journey of Abraham's servant Eliezer with that of Yaakov. Genesis chapter 24 verse 10. And the servant took 10 of his master's camels and left, for all his master's good gifts were in his hand. And he arose and went to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nachor. Genesis chapter 24 verse 22. And it came to pass, as the camels had done drinking, that the man took a golden earring of 1/2 shekel weight, and 2 bracelets for her hands of 10 shekels weight of gold. Genesis chapter 24 verse 53. And the servant brought forth jewels of silver, and jewels of gold, and raiment, and gave them to Ribkah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother precious things. Genesis chapter 24 verse 54. And they did eat and drink, he and the men that were with him, and tarried all night. And they rose up in the morning, and he said, Send me away unto my master. Here we witness Eliezer traveling with other servants and 10 camels laden with jewels, silver, gold, and other precious things. Yaakov, on the other hand, according to his own confession, travels alone, armed only with his staff. Genesis chapter 32 verse 10. I do not deserve the least of all the loving commitment and all the truth which you have shown your servant, for I passed over this Yarden with my staff, and now I have become 2 groups. I cannot help but think of Yahushua sending out his disciples in a similar fashion. Mark chapter 6 verses 7 to 9. And he called the 12 near, and began to send them out 2 by 2, and gave them authority over unclean spirits. And he instructed them to take none at all for the journey except a staff, no bag, no bread, no copper in their money belts, but to wear sandals, and not to wear 2 undergarments. I see a possible connection between these 2 sendings, the sending of Yaakov and the sending of the disciples. Yaakov, like Abraham, is called to leave his family, his inheritance, and his security behind him, and to walk by faith in the promise and power of Yahweh to provide for his every need. It may be difficult for us to fully understand how dangerous it was for an individual to travel from country to country alone. But this is what Yaakov is called to do. Likewise, the disciples of Yahushua were called to leave their homes, families, flocks, and security behind them and walk in faith that Yahweh would provide for their every need as well. Unlike Eliezer, who traveled with his master's wealth, with camels, and with companions, Yaakov is forced to make his journey alone. Eliezer made this journey under favorable circumstances and with the blessing of his master. Yaakov makes his journey out of fear and under the threat of death. This journey is indeed a journey of faith for Yaakov. So, Yaakov sets out from Beersheba and makes his way to the home of his ancestors in Charan, a journey of several months. At nightfall, most likely on the 2nd night, roughly 52 miles away from Beersheba, Yaakov stops to sleep in the mountains of Luz. While Yaakov renames this area, we are told later in the narrative that the original name of the area was Luz, Lamd, Vav, Zayin. In Hebrew the name means almond tree or nut tree. While this may indeed be the meaning of the name may mean an almond tree, as in 30-7. In fact, the region is an ideal fruit and nut country. An alternative possibility is to derive it from the Arabic loud, a place of refuge, a name highly appropriate to the present circumstances. We will note some other interesting information about Luz and Beth El later in this portion. But for now let us just see that it is possible that Yaakov chooses to come to this particular place because it is known to be a refuge. I would suggest that Yaakov, traveling alone as darkness falls, seeks refuge from the various and real threats of the night. Regardless of the reasons, it is here in the mountains of Luz that Yaakov makes his bed for the night. The use of the definite article, with the word for place, maum, seems to indicate that there is something special about the place that Yaakov happens upon. In the context of the story, however, it is clear that Yaakov comes to this place simply because it is getting dark and possibly because the name of the place indicates that it is a safe place to be in the dark. What happens next is clearly not anticipated by Yaakov. Genesis chapter 28 verse 11-15, and he came upon a place and stopped over for the night, for the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed and saw a ladder set up on the earth, and its top reached to the heavens, and saw messengers of Elohim going up and coming down on it. And see, Yahweh stood above it and said, I am Yahweh Elohim of Abraham your father and the Elohim of Yitschaq. The land on which you are lying, I give it to you and your seed. And your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall break forth to the west and to the east, to the north and the south. And all the clans of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your seed. And see, I am with you and shall guard you wherever you go, and shall bring you back to this land. For I am not going to leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. Before we go any further, let us clarify some important translation issues and address some key details in these verses. First, let us recognize that what Yaakov sees is not a vision but a dream. We may recall that dreams are indeed typical vehicles through which Yahweh communicates with people. Dreams are especially used when Yahweh desires to communicate with a Gentile or unbeliever, as he did with Abimelech and Laban. Genesis chapter 20 verse 3, But Elohim came to Abimelech in a dream by night, and said to him, See, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. Genesis chapter 31 verse 24, But in a dream by night Elohim came to Laban the Aramean, and said to him, Guard yourself, that you do not speak to Yaakov either good or evil. We know that Yahweh likewise spoke to the descendants of Abraham and the prophets through both dreams and visions. Genesis chapter 28 verse 12, And he dreamed and saw a ladder set up on the earth, and its top reached to the heavens, and saw messengers of Elohim going up and coming down on it. Genesis chapter 37 verse 5, And Joseph dreamed a dream, and told it to his brothers. So they hated him even more. Numbers chapter 12 verse 6, And he said, Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I Yahweh will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. I want to be very clear that what Yaakov sees is a dream. Like all dreams, it contains fantastical imagery that should not necessarily be taken literally. The details of a dream may indeed be informative and even very realistic, but they are not necessarily real. Dreams should not be the foundation of our faith or our doctrines. But the truths that dreams communicate, such as in the case of Yaakov's ladder, may indeed be the foundation for one's faith and doctrine. What is important is the truth, not the symbols that are used to relay it. With this distinction clarified, let us now look at some of the details of Yaakov's dream. While tradition has latched onto the idea of Yaakov's ladder, this may not be the best translation of this unique biblical word. The Hebrew word translated in the King James Version as ladder is sulam, samek, lamd, mem. The Hebrew term sulam, here rendered stairway, is unique in the Bible. Its etymology is uncertain. It may derive from the stem, to cast up a mount, or may be connected with the Akkadian, similta, steps. Sulam could therefore be a ladder or a stairway ramp. The inspirational stimulus for the image seems to be a ladder of ascent to heaven known from Egyptian and Chittite sources, in which both divinities and the souls of the dead are provided with ladders to enable them to ascend from the netherworld to the abodes of men and the mighty ones. Another explanation of the representational reality lies in the Babylonian ziggurat, the temple tower familiar from the Tower of Babel story in chapter 11. This edifice was equipped with an external stairway, a ramp linking each stage of the tower with the next until its top reached the sky. It should be noted, though, that in Yaakob's dream, the Sulam, whatever it be, does not function as a channel of communication between man and Elohim. We may well note one further connection with Babel and Babylon in this text that may shed some insight into this story and what Yaakov sees. When Yaakov wakes up from this peculiar dream, he refers to the site of the dream as the gate of heaven. Genesis chapter 28 verse 17. As we conclude this study, we are reminded that Yaakov left Beth El clinging to the promises Yahweh had spoken. He did not yet see the fulfillment of those promises, nor did he fully understand how Yahweh would accomplish them. He simply had to trust that Yahweh would remain faithful and that one day he would bring him safely back to that very place. Centuries later, we have the privilege of seeing what Yaakov could only anticipate by faith. Yahweh has indeed provided the mediator between himself and mankind, his son, Yahushua the Messiah. Through him, the promises of Yahweh find their fulfillment, and through him we have access to the Father. Like Yaakov, we are all on a journey. There will be seasons when we cannot see the end of the road, but we can trust the one who has promised never to leave us nor forsake us. The Elohim of Abraham, Yitschaq, and Yaakov is still faithful today. He keeps every promise he makes, accomplishes every purpose he declares, and leads his people according to his perfect plan. May we leave this passage with hearts that trust Yahweh completely, walk faithfully in his ways, and keep our eyes fixed upon Yahushua the Messiah, our mediator, our high priest, and the one through whom every promise of Yahweh is yes and amen. Yaakov was afraid, and said, "How dreadful is this place! This is none other but the house of Elohim, and this is the gate of heaven." The notion that such gateways existed was widespread. One of the titles of the high priest of Thebes in Egypt was the opener of the gates of heavens, while the city of Babylon was understood by the Semites to have derived its name from Babylon, gate of the Elohim. Given this information, we may assume that Yaakov, though born and raised in the land of Kenahani, is nonetheless an Aramean by heritage and most likely is familiar with the heritage of that land. Remember that both his grandfather Abraham and his mother Ribkah are from the land of Charan. If what Yaakov sees in his dream is a ziggurat from the land of Charan, then the power of Yahweh's promise becomes even more significant. We should note that the promise Yahweh gives Yaakov is to be with him wherever he goes. Genesis chapter 28 verse 15, "And see, I am with you and shall guard you wherever you go, and shall bring you back to this land. For I am not going to leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you." If Yaakov recognizes the ziggurat as representing his mother's homeland, then the point of the communication of this dream is clearly to bring him a great deal of assurance and comfort. Before we look at the details of this communication, there is one more point to be made concerning the details and translation of this passage. According to the traditional interpretation of verse 13, Yahweh is at the top of the stairway, but he is standing at a distance. Genesis chapter 28 verse 13, "And see, Yahweh stood above it and said, I am Yahweh Elohim of Abraham your father and the Elohim of Yitschaq. The land on which you are lying, I give it to you and your seed." While this is indeed the dominant translation, that Yahweh stood above is not necessarily the best translation. This verse does not claim that Yahweh was standing on top of the stairway or above it as some translations say, but that Yahweh was standing at Yaakov's side, beside him. By itself, the combination of the preposition and pronominal suffix in, aleph, ayin, lamd, yad, vav, could be interpreted either way. While nitzav, in the nipple followed by al, may indicate to stand on top of something, and hippel, put something on top of something, in many more instances it means to stand beside, or to stand over. Quote, Nitzav aleph means that the subject of the sentence rises above the person or the thing by which it stands. Hence in Genesis chapter 18 verses 1 to 2, Abraham sat while 3 men stood by, over, him, Nitzavim aleph. Similarly, Abraham's servant stands near, Nitzav al, the well. Particularly instructive is 1 Samuel chapter 19 verse 20, where Shemuel was standing over, Nitzav al, the prophets. To stand over here means to stand in a position of authority, to preside over. And here, in 28 to 13, Yahweh and Yaakov are near each other, and because of this Yahweh can say Amar to Yaakov rather than call Kara to him as we have it in 22:11, 15. And Yahweh's messenger called Vayikra to him from heaven. Furthermore, Yaakov says a few verses later, verse 16, surely Yahweh is in this place, presupposes Yahweh's immediate presence in the place, rather than in heaven at the top of the stairway. While it was not uncommon for ancient religions and peoples to believe in ladders and towers that ascended and descended from heaven to earth, this is not the picture Yaakov sees. Yes, maybe he sees a ziggurat with messengers ascending and descending upon it. It is important, however, that we see that Yahweh is not standing at the top of this tower or mountain at a great distance. Instead, Yahweh is standing right with Yaakov. This is the very heart of the words communicated to Yaakov. Let us now turn to the actual revelation given to Yaakov, and then we will look at Yaakov's response to the encounter. Yahweh then identifies himself as the Elohim, Mighty One, of Abraham and Yitschaq. There is no question as to which Elohim it is that is appearing to Yaakov in this dream. It is Yahweh. Next, Yahweh affirms the Abrahamic covenant. This covenant is about the inheritance of a land and the gift of multiple seed. However, we also see in this revelation given by Yahweh to Yaakov a prophetic statement concerning Yaakov's future seed. Here we note that the seed of Yaakov is referred to as the dust of the earth. In earlier proclamations this was a reference to the innumerability of the multiple seed. Genesis chapter 13 verse 16, and I will make your seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall your seed also be numbered. We have also witnessed how this particular identification can be contrasted with the promise of seed like the stars of heaven, indicating two manner of lines, one motivated by spiritual matters and one more fleshly matters. Genesis chapter 26 verse 4, and I will make your seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto your seed all these countries, and in your seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. In this portion, I believe that the expression, the dust of the earth, refers to that which is trodden underfoot. As the dust of the earth, the seed of Yaakov will be persecuted, oppressed, put down, and trodden upon. Here we may hearken back to the words spoken to Abraham at the cutting of the covenant of the pieces. Genesis chapter 15 verses 13 to 14, and he said unto Abram, know of a surety that your seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation, whom they shall serve, will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. And, behold, I am with you, and will keep you in all places whither you go, and will bring you again into this land, for I will not leave you, until I have done that which I have spoken to you. Clearly it is in Yaakov's lifetime that the pilgrimage to Egypt takes place. We may also note here that the promise is that Yaakov's seed will be spread to the four corners of the earth. This, I believe, is a reference to the greater exile of the house of Israel and the house of Yehudah. In many respects, this is a part of what is happening to Yaakov as he receives the revelation. Yaakov, because of the blessings he inherited, is being persecuted and exiled from the very land of promise. The good news of this revelation is the fact that Yahweh will be with Yaakov and his seed, regardless of where they may be scattered. We who identify ourselves as belonging to the children of Israel should rejoice greatly in these promises. While we may be scattered to the four corners of the earth, Yahweh promises to be with us, to keep us, to bring us again into the land, and not to abandon us until he has done all that he has promised. Oh, how much we need to understand and believe these words. Thus, we should understand verses 13 and 14 as prophecy and verse 15 as a promise in response to this prophecy. This prophecy and promise are affirmed and reaffirmed throughout the rest of the Torah. Psalm chapter 106 verse 27, to overthrow their seed also among the nations, and to scatter them in the lands. Isaiah chapter 11 verse 12, and he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Yehudah from the four corners of the earth. Isaiah chapter 43 verse 5, fear not, for I am with you, I will bring your seed from the east, and gather you from the west. Jeremiah chapter 9 verse 16, I will scatter them also among the heathen, whom neither they nor their fathers have known, and I will send a sword after them, till I have consumed them. Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 14, and I will be found of you, says Yahweh, and I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations, and from all the places whither I have driven you, says Yahweh. And I will bring you again into the place whence I caused you to be carried away captive. Jeremiah chapter 31 verses 8 to 10, behold, I will bring them from the north country, and gather them from the coasts of the earth, and with them the blind and the lame, the woman with child and her that travails with child together. A great company shall return thither. They shall come with weeping, and with supplications will I lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight way, wherein they shall not stumble, for I am a father to Israel. And Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the word of Yahweh, O all you nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, He that scattered Israel will gather him, and keep him, as a shepherd doth his flock. As is true of the Abrahamic covenant, the purpose of all these blessings being bestowed upon the seed of Abraham is that they might be a blessing wherever Yahweh plants them. All the families of the earth are to be blessed by the seed of Abraham. It should not surprise us then when we witness a mixed multitude coming out of Egypt with the seed of Abraham. Nor should it surprise us that the prophets speak of others from among the nations gathering themselves to the Elohim of Abraham, Yitschaq, and now, Yaakov. Exodus chapter 12 verse 38, And a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks, and herds, even very much cattle. Isaiah chapter 56 verse 8, Adonai Yahweh who gathers the outcasts of Israel says, Yet will I gather others to him, beside those that are gathered unto him. Isaiah chapter 66 verse 18, For I know their works and their thoughts. It shall come, that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come, and see my glory. We may note that this is but the first of two encounters between Yahweh and Yaakov where he is assured of Yahweh's presence with him in exile. Genesis chapter 46 verses 2-4, And Elohim spoke to Yisrael in the visions of the night, and said, Yaakov, Yaakov. And he said, Here am I, and he said, I am Elohim, the Elohim of your father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of you a great nation. I will go down with you into Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph shall put his hand upon your eyes. Clearly the point of this revelation is the presence of Yahweh. Yahweh is not far off looking down upon his people. He is right with them, leading them, protecting them, and loving them. Let us look now at Yaakov's response to this shocking encounter. Genesis chapter 28 verse 16, And Yaakov awoke from his sleep and said, Truly, Yahweh is in this place, and I did not know it. There are 3 parts to this verse, each with a lesson to be learned. The first lesson is taught by the narrator, Yahweh, of the story as it is told to Moshe. The verse begins with the sudden statement that Yaakov has awaked out of his sleep. This phrase presupposes that Yaakov's first state is one of sleep. We may understand this phrase in a spiritual way. Prior to this encounter, Yaakov was spiritually sleeping. While concerned about spiritual matters such as birthrights and patriarchal blessings, it is clear that Yaakov was willing to achieve such things by his own, and his mother's, cleverness and wit. Yaakov clearly possesses the attribute of self-reliance and human ingenuity. We may, at this point, question the depth of Yaakov's understanding and faith in Yahweh's ability to give what is intended to be given. Yaakov has clearly demonstrated the character traits of self-determination and self-reliance. Now that he is exiled, poor, and alone, he experiences a spiritual awakening. Yahweh is with him. This leads to the second part of the sentence, Surely Yahweh is in this place. While previously leaning upon his own understanding and ingenuity to accomplish the purposes of the Creator, now Yaakov suddenly realizes that Yahweh is with him. What Yaakov discovers in Luz is the very omnipresence of Yahweh. To be omnipresent means to be without limit in time and in space. In other words, there is nowhere that Yahweh is not. While we may speak of him in anthropomorphic terms, we should not take this language to be literal. In other words, Yahweh is not constrained by the limits of a body. Thus, we should not say that he is present in 2 places at once, but that he is present in every place at once. The revelation that Yaakov comes to understand is the reality that Yahweh is present in the place where he slept. The promise of Yahweh to Yaakov is the revelation that he will be with Yaakov no matter where he or his seed will be sent. Since Yaakov's seed is prophesied to be spread in every direction, Yahweh must be present in every direction. This can only be so because Yahweh is omnipresent. We may recall here the words of the psalmist. Psalm chapter 139 verses 1-12. O Yahweh, you have searched me, and known me. You know my downsitting and mine uprising, you understandest my thoughts afar off. You compass my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word in my tongue, but, lo, O Yahweh, you know it altogether. You have beset me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain unto it. Whither shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend up into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you art there. If I take the wings of the morning, and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall your hand lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yea, the darkness hides not from you, but the night shines as the day, the darkness and the light are both alike to you. We may also note that it is precisely the omnipresent nature of Yahweh that allows him to fulfill his promise to protect and provide for Yaakov and his seed regardless of where they may travel. Deuteronomy chapter 33 verse 27, The eternal Elohim is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms, and he shall thrust out the enemy from before you, and shall say, Destroy them. The third part of Yaakov's response is his own confession of ignorance, I knew it not. Here we see the cause of most of our fears, anxieties, and sins. While spiritually asleep, we are unable to see the presence of Yahweh. Therefore, we fear we must rely upon our own limited resources. Asleep, we are unable to see the presence of Yahweh. Therefore, we do not fear him. Asleep, we are unable to see the presence of Yahweh. Therefore, we grant our souls permission to sin as if it will go unnoticed. Asleep, we are unable to see the presence of Yahweh. Therefore, we lean to our own understanding. While Yahweh is infinite in time, space, and knowledge, we are not. Yaakov is walking in the presence of Yahweh all along his journey, but in his spiritual slumber he is completely unaware of Yahweh's presence. Once Yaakov is awakened from his slumber, he quickly responds. We too have been called to this awakening. Romans chapter 13 verses 11 to 14, and that, knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. Let us walk honestly, as in the day, not in rioting and drunkenness, not in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and envying. But put you, all, on the Master Yahushua Messiah, and make no provision for the flesh, to fulfill the lusts thereof. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 34, Awake to righteousness, and sin not. For some have not the knowledge of Elohim, I speak this to your shame. Ephesians chapter 5 verses 14 to 16, Wherefore he says, Awake you that sleep, and arise from the dead, and Messiah shall give you light. See then that you, all, walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Once we have been awakened, we are expected to walk in the revelation that has opened our eyes to Yahweh's truth. Upon his awakening, Yaakov renames the place where he received the revelation, Beth El, which in Hebrew means the house of El. He also sets up a pillar or stone slab and anoints it with oil. Genesis chapter 28 verses 18 to 19, And Yaakov rose early in the morning, and took the stone that he had put at his head, set it up as a standing column, and poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of that place Beth El. However, the name of that city had been Luz previously. I cannot help but see a foreshadowing of Yahushua the Messiah in this imagery. We may recall Yahushua as the stone that the builders rejected, as the anointed one, and also as the temple or tabernacle of Yahweh. Luke chapter 20 verses 17 to 18, And he beheld them, and said, What is this then that is written, The stone which the builders rejected, the same is become the head of the corner. Whosoever shall fall upon that stone shall be broken, but on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 4, To whom coming, as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of Elohim, and precious. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 4, And did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Messiah. Luke chapter 4 verse 18, The Spirit of Yahweh is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised. Hebrews chapter 1 verses 8 to 9, But unto the Son he says, Your throne, O Elohim, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness, and hated iniquity. Therefore Elohim, even your Elohim, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your fellows. John chapter 3 verse 34, For he whom Elohim has sent speaks the words of Elohim, for Elohim gives not the Spirit by measure unto him. Matthew chapter 3 verse 16, And Yahushua, when he was baptized, went up straightway out of the water, and, lo, the heavens were opened unto him, and he saw the Spirit of Elohim descending like a dove, and lighting upon him. John chapter 2 verses 19 to 21, Yahushua answered and said unto them, Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Then said the Yehudim, 46 years was this temple in building, and will you rear it up in 3 days? But he spoke of the temple of his body. Yaakov then makes a vow to Yahweh. Genesis chapter 28 verses 20 to 22, And Yaakov made a vow, saying, Seeing Elohim is with me, and has kept me in this way that I am going, and has given me bread to eat and a garment to put on, when I have returned to my father's house in peace, and Yahweh has been my Elohim. Then this stone which I have set as a standing column shall be Elohim's house, and of all that you give me, I shall certainly give a tenth to you. This vow, however, has been misunderstood by many believers. Due to Yaakov's previous craftiness and subtlety, many believe that Yaakov is bargaining with Yahweh instead of making a vow to Yahweh. Most people see Yaakov negotiating and manipulating Yahweh to deliver on his promises, or else Yaakov will worship some other Elohim. This is clearly not the case. The Torah is very clear that Yaakov is not negotiating, rather, he is taking a solemn oath. The confusion comes from the if, and, then language of the vow, which most understand to be a conditional clause. The if, in this case, however, is not a question of whether Yahweh will prove himself to be faithful to his promises. Instead, it is a question of Yaakov's own ability to merit such favor and not disqualify himself by his own shortcomings. In Hebrew, the verbs describing Yahweh's actions throughout verses 20 and 21 follow the same grammatical pattern. Yahweh is the one who goes with Yaakov, watches over him, provides for him, and brings him safely back to the land. The statement, Yahweh shall be my Elohim, continues in that same pattern. Then, in verse 22, the Hebrew suddenly changes. The verb form is different, and the focus shifts away from Yahweh's actions to Yaakov's response. The subject is no longer Yahweh, but the stone that Yaakov has set up as a pillar. Because of that grammatical shift, many Hebrew scholars believe the conditional statement actually continues through the end of verse 21, with the true response beginning in verse 22. If that understanding is correct, the passage would read more like this. If Elohim remains with me, protects me on this journey, provides for my needs, brings me safely home, and Yahweh continues to be my Elohim, then this stone shall become Elohim's house. And I will faithfully give him a tenth of all he gives me. Let's put it in another way. This understanding is similar to what we find in the temptation of Yahushua in the wilderness. When Satan said, If you are the son of Elohim, he was not expressing doubt about Yahushua's identity. The Greek construction can carry the sense of, since, or, because you are. In other words, Satan was not questioning whether Yahushua was the son of Elohim. He was attempting to persuade him to misuse his sonship. The temptation was not, prove that you are the son of Elohim. Rather, it was, since you are the son of Elohim, use your power for your own advantage. In the same way, Yaakov's words in Genesis chapter 28 should not necessarily be understood as expressing uncertainty. He had just received Yahweh's covenant promises in a dream. Yahweh had assured him that he would be with him, protect him wherever he traveled, provide for him, and bring him safely back to the land. There is no indication that Yahweh's promises were in doubt. Seen in that light, Yaakov's vow is better understood as a response of faith than as an attempt to bargain with Yahweh. The sense of his words is essentially this. Since Yahweh has promised to be with me, to watch over me, to provide for me, and to bring me safely home, then I will devote myself to him. Yahweh will be my Elohim, this place will be dedicated to his worship, and I will faithfully return a tenth of everything he graciously gives me. This transforms the passage from a conditional negotiation into a declaration of commitment. Yaakov is not placing conditions upon Yahweh's faithfulness. Instead, he is responding to Yahweh's covenant promises with worship, trust, and obedience. His promise to give a tenth of all that Yahweh provides is not an attempt to earn blessing but an expression of gratitude for the blessings Yahweh has already promised. That same principle applies to believers today. We do not obey Yahweh in order to persuade him to be faithful to us. Rather, we obey because he has already proven himself faithful. Our worship, our generosity, and our obedience are grateful responses to his grace, not attempts to bargain for his favor. That understanding also fits the larger message of Genesis. Throughout Yaakob's life, the emphasis has never been on Yaakov choosing Yahweh. Instead, the emphasis has consistently been on Yahweh choosing Yaakov. Before the twins were even born, Yahweh declared that the older would serve the younger. Yahweh chose Yaakov according to his own sovereign purpose, not because Yaakov earned that privilege, nor because Yaakov first chose him. For that reason, it seems unlikely that Yaakov is suddenly bargaining with Yahweh by saying, "If you do these things for me, then you can be my Elohim." Rather, Yaakov is responding to the covenant Yahweh has already established. His vow is not an attempt to negotiate with Yahweh but a commitment to live in light of Yahweh's covenant faithfulness. In other words, Yaakov is not placing Yahweh on probation. He is acknowledging that if Yahweh fulfills everything he has promised, which he certainly will, then Yaakov will publicly worship him, recognize Beth El as a place dedicated to him, and faithfully give back a tenth of everything Yahweh provides. This interpretation also highlights an important biblical principle. Our relationship with Yahweh does not begin because we choose him first. It begins because he graciously calls us to himself. Our obedience, worship, and devotion are responses to his faithfulness, not conditions we place upon him. Genesis chapter 28 reminds us that Yahweh is always the one who takes the initiative. He establishes the covenant, makes the promises, and remains faithful to fulfill them. Our privilege is to respond with worship, trust, and faithful obedience as we walk with him. Elohim does not sit idly by, waiting to discover if he has Yaakov's trust. Read as, "And if Yahweh shall be my Elohim," the statement becomes a further part of Yaakov's imploring of Elohim. By his actions Yaakov recognizes that Elohim has a right to look elsewhere. Maybe Yaakov has disqualified himself, but is there a second chance? Yaakov is throwing himself on Elohim's mercy, not calculating whether to accept Elohim. Therefore, we should understand that Yaakov is not bargaining with Yahweh. He is humbly imploring him to be his Elohim and not reject him. We may then better understand the vow as follows. Genesis chapter 28 verses 20 to 22, "And Yaakov vowed a vow, saying, If Elohim will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat, and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then, on top of everything else he has done, shall Yahweh be my Elohim, and this stone, which I have set for a pillar, shall be Elohim's house. And of all that thou shalt give me I will surely give the tenth unto you." We should note that in the Torah and with Yahushua, it is always Yahweh and Messiah doing the electing. Genesis chapter 17 verse 8, "And I will give unto you, and to your seed after you, the land wherein you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim." Jeremiah chapter 24 verse 7, "And I will give them a heart to know me, that I am Yahweh, and they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim, for they shall return unto me with their whole heart." Jeremiah chapter 32 verse 38, "And they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim." Ezekiel chapter 11 verse 20, "That they may walk in my statutes, and keep mine ordinances, and do them, and they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim." 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 16, "And what agreement hath the temple of Elohim with idols? For you, all, are the temple of the living Elohim. As Elohim has said, I will dwell in them, and walk in them, and I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people." John chapter 15 verse 16, "You, all, have not chosen me, but I have chosen you, and ordained you, that you, all, should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain. That whatsoever you, all, shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it you." In response to all that Yahweh promises, Yaakov vows to give a tenth or a tithe of all that he possesses. This is the main clause of Yaakov's vow. If Yahweh is faithful in doing all that he has promised, including being Yaakov's Elohim, then Yaakov will be faithful to give a tenth of all he possesses. We may note here, as was true for Abraham, that this tithe is not the beginning of a weekly or even a yearly pattern of tithing, it is but a one-time event. It is clear that Abraham gave a tithe to Melchizedek, the high priest of El Elyon. But here for Yaakov there is no such high priest, nor is there an altar. We are left, therefore, with the question as to whom Yaakov would give his tithe, or how he would give it to Yahweh. It is possible that Yaakov would offer a tenth of his herds, flocks, and harvests on an altar as a burnt offering, but no clear answer is given to us in the Torah. As we conclude this study, we are reminded that Yaakov left Beth El clinging to the promises Yahweh had spoken. He did not yet see the fulfillment of those promises, nor did he fully understand how Yahweh would accomplish them. He simply had to trust that Yahweh would remain faithful and that one day he would bring him safely back to that very place. Centuries later, we have the privilege of seeing what Yaakov could only anticipate by faith. Yahweh has indeed provided the mediator between himself and mankind, his son, Yahushua the Messiah. Through him, the promises of Yahweh find their fulfillment, and through him we have access to the Father. Like Yaakov, we are all on a journey. There will be seasons when we cannot see the end of the road, but we can trust the one who has promised never to leave us nor forsake us. The Elohim of Abraham, Yitschaq, and Yaakov is still faithful today. He keeps every promise he makes, accomplishes every purpose he declares, and leads his people according to his perfect plan. May we leave this passage with hearts that trust Yahweh completely, walk faithfully in his ways, and keep our eyes fixed upon Yahushua the Messiah, our mediator, our high priest, and the one through whom every promise of Yahweh is yes and amen. Yahweh bless you, and until next time, continue to seek him with all your heart, delight in his word, and walk faithfully in his covenant. Let's pray. Abba Yahweh, we thank you for your living and eternal word. Thank you for the lessons you have taught us through the lives of Yitschaq, Ribkah, Yaakov, and Esaw. Thank that you remain faithful. Your plans cannot be overturned, and your promises never fail. Father, help us to be people who trust you completely. Give us hearts that do not lean on our own understanding or resort to our own schemes, but that patiently wait upon you, knowing that you are always working for the good of those who love you and are called according to your purpose. Teach us to value the things that Esaw despised. May we never trade the eternal for the temporary or exchange the riches of your kingdom for the passing pleasures of this world. Help us to treasure our inheritance in Messiah above everything else. Like Yitschaq, may we learn to walk by faith during seasons of famine and uncertainty, trusting that you are our provider. Like Yaakov, may we recognize that you are always present, even when we feel alone or are traveling through difficult seasons of life. Open our eyes to see that you are working behind the scenes, accomplishing your perfect will. Write your Torah upon our hearts through your set-apart Spirit. Teach us to love your instruction, delight in your commandments, and walk in obedience, not out of obligation, but out of love and gratitude for all you have done for us. Thank you for providing the perfect mediator, Yahushua the Messiah, through whom we have access to you. Thank you that every promise you have made finds its fulfillment in him. Strengthen our faith so that we may walk worthy of the calling you have given us, keeping our eyes fixed on Yahushua, the author and perfecter of our faith. Protect each person who has joined this study. Bless their homes, strengthen their families, encourage the weary, comfort the hurting, and draw those who are far from you into a deeper relationship with you. Fill us with wisdom, discernment, humility, and courage as we seek to live as faithful servants in a world that desperately needs your truth. May our lives reflect your holiness, our words proclaim your goodness, and our hearts remain steadfast until the day we stand before you. We give you all the praise, all the honor, and all the glory. In the precious name of Yahushua the Messiah, we pray. Amen. Next week, Yahweh willing, Genesis 29-31. Hope to see you there. Thank you for listening and watching. If you could please give it a like and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our next Torah reading. Yahweh bless and shalom to your homes.